Welcome to our College Savings webinar. Today's webinar features Mark Kantrowitz of savingforcollege.com. Mark will walk you through the basics of how to save for college with a focus on how 529 plans work and how to get the most out of them. I'm Martha Kordiak-Mert, COO of savingforcollege.com, and I'll be serving as the moderator today. We collected questions during the registration process, and our presentation today will address many of those questions. You can also type your questions into the Q&A section of the screen. We'll save at least 10 to 15 minutes at the end to answer as many questions as possible. Be aware that we do get a lot of questions during these webinars, so if we're not able to get to yours, please visit us at forum.savingforcollege.com. You can try asking your question there. Also, I want to let everyone know that we will be sending out a link to the recording of this webinar and to the slides. So look for an email sometime later today or tomorrow that'll contain those. We'll also have a little survey in there, so we'd love if you can fill that out and let us know how we did. All right, so I also want to mention that today's webinar is being brought to you by Private College 529 Plan. Private College 529 Plan is the only federally authorized 529 prepaid tuition plan that allows families to save on the cost at hundreds of private colleges across the country. Families lock in current tuition and save on the cost, families lock in current tuition and fee rates guaranteed by the participating institutions. Account owners enjoy no fees, no market risk, and the same federal tax benefits as other 529 plans. You can learn more at privatecollege529.com. I'm excited to announce that we also have with us today Jonathan Sparling, who is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Private College 529. Jonathan started his career working in the financial aid office at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, where he counseled students and families on college planning, savings, financing, and general financial education. Prior to joining PC 529, Jonathan served as Associate Director at the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, where he led their college relations team during a time of growth and transition into a national lender. Jonathan will be discussing how prepaid tuition plans work, and he'll be on hand to answer questions during our Q&A. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks, Martha.
Okay, and before we get into our presentation, I just have a quick poll question for the audience. So the question is going to be, are you already saving for college with a 529 plan? And let me launch this poll. You can answer that yes or no. Are you already saving for college with a 529 plan? I'm seeing the responses coming in, and I will share the results in just a moment. We'll give everyone a few seconds here. All right, slowing down. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll, and we'll share the results. So it's pretty split, but we do have slightly more people, 55%, who are not yet saving with the 529 plan. So I think you're going to get a lot of great information out of the webinar today to help you with that. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I will turn it over to Mark.
Thank you, Martha. So we're talking today about how to save for college. And let's discuss the main college savings options. This table compares the most popular options for saving for college. Each type of college savings account provides different tax and financial aid advantages. First, there are the income restrictions. The income restrictions are contribution limits, not distribution limits. Once the money is in a 529 plan or Coverdell Education Savings Account or Roth IRA, there are no income restrictions on taking money out of the plans. Now, Coverdell Education Savings Accounts and Roth IRAs both have income restrictions on contributions, while 529 plans and UTMA accounts do not. The income phase-outs for the Coverdell Education Savings Account do not change annually. And this slide updates the Roth IRA limits for 2021. Aside from gift tax exclusions, 529 plans and UGMA or UTMA accounts do not have contribution limits, while Coverdell Education Savings Accounts are limited to $2,000 per year, and Roth IRAs are limited to $6,000 per year. It can increase to $7,000 a year if you're age 50 or older. The tax benefits are shown here, and you may be wondering what the QHEE stands for, it's pronounced key. That's a qualified higher education expense. It's the eligible expenses. Now, the Roth IRA allows a tax-free return of contributions, so you can use that for pretty much any purpose, including paying for college. But there are some financial aid consequences of that we'll discuss in a second. The tax treatment of UGMA and UTMA accounts, which are also known as the kiddie tax rules, applies to college students until they reach age 24. So now let's talk about the financial aid advantages. Custodial 529 plan accounts are reported as a parent asset on a dependent student's pre-application for federal student aid, or FAFSA form, reducing the impact on aid eligibility as compared with the financial aid treatment of a student's own assets, such as an UGMA or UTMA account. Parent assets are assessed on a bracketed scale with a top bracket of 5.64%. UGMA and UTMA accounts are reported as a student asset, and that reduces aid eligibility by 20% of the asset value on the FAFSA and 25% on the CSS profile form. The CSS profile form is an alternate financial aid form that's used by about 200 mostly private colleges to award their own financial aid funds. These colleges still must use the FAFSA for federal and state aid. A Roth IRA is not reported as an asset on the FAFSA, but distributions are reported as income on a subsequent year's FAFSA. That's even a tax-free return of contributions will be reported as untaxed income on the FAFSA. And that can reduce aid eligibility by as much as half the distribution amount. Thus, $10,000 in a 529 plan can reduce aid eligibility by up to $564, compared with $5,000 in a Roth IRA and $2,000 in an UGMA or UTMA account. So clearly, the 529 plans are more tax advantaged than the other options. Continuing with this comparison, the college savings vehicles differ according to the set of qualified expenses for college and for K-12. The Coverdell Education Savings Account has a broader set of K-12 expenses than 529 plans, but it is more limited in other ways. The earnings portion of a non-qualified distribution from a 529 plan or Coverdell is subject to ordinary income taxes and a 10% tax penalty, plus possible recapture of state income tax breaks that are attributable to the distribution. So let's start with some of the basics of 529 plans. These are the fundamental aspects. So 529 plans offer the best mix of tax and financial aid advantages for families who are saving for college. Most are state-based, with the exception of the private college 529 plan. And all but one state offer at least one 529 plans. Several states offer more than one. So there are more than 90 529 plans across 49 states. Now, the key benefits of the 529 plan include, one, the earnings accumulate on a tax-deferred basis and are entirely tax-free when you use them to pay for qualified higher education expenses. 529 plans also offer significant estate planning benefits, such as superfunding. We'll discuss what superfunding is in a bit. More than 2/3 of these states offer a state income tax deduction or tax credit on contributions to the state's 529 plan. In 7 states, the state income tax break is for contributions to any state's 529 plan. 529 plans have no income or age restrictions on contributions or distributions, unlike other college savings accounts like the Coverdell Education Savings Account. With the Coverdell, you have to stop making contributions when the beneficiary reaches age 18, and you have to take the distributions by the time the beneficiary reaches age 30, unless it's a special needs beneficiary. If a 529 plan account is owned by the student or the student's parent, assuming they're a dependent student, the impact on financial aid eligibility is minimal. 529 plans have no annual contribution limits, other than the annual gift tax exclusion, which is $15,000 per donor, the contributor per beneficiary per year. 529 plans have high aggregate contribution limits that range from $235,000 to $529,000. So the key to using a 529 plan is to start saving as early as possible. This chart demonstrates that your greatest asset is time. The sooner you start saving, the more time there'll be for your earnings to compound. The examples in this chart assume that there was an initial lump sum investment of $5,000, followed by monthly contributions of $50, $100, or $200 over 6, 12, and 18 years. So you can see not only is the amount saved increased with the amount you contribute, but the sooner you start saving, the more time there'll be for your earnings to grow. Now, if you start saving at birth and you just do monthly contributions, about a third of your college savings goal will come from the earnings. If you wait until the child enters high school, less than 10% of the college savings goal will come from the earnings, and you'll have to save 6 times as much per month to reach the same college savings goal. Now, how do you choose a 529 plan? So the first step is you need to decide whether you're pursuing an advisor sold plan or a direct sold plan. Direct sold 529 plans are offered directly by the state, while advisor sold 529 plans are sold by financial advisors. Advisor sold 529 plans provide guidance from a professional financial advisor, while direct sold 529 plans are more a DIY, do-it-yourself proposition. Now, the advisor sold 529 plans may charge commissions, and they tend to have higher expense ratios than the direct sold plans. There are 2 types of direct sold plans, which we'll discuss in the next slides: 529 savings plans and prepaid plans. So now we'll talk about the prepaid tuition plans. But before I do this, I'd like Martha to introduce the second poll question. Well, actually, I think I'm supposed to ask her at the end of the slide. So I will continue. The difference between a savings plan and a prepaid tuition plan is like the difference between a defined contribution plan, like a 401k retirement plan, and a defined benefit plan, like a pension plan. 529 college savings plans are more popular than the prepaid plans. Investments in a 529 plan can lose money, however, but investors can also benefit from potentially higher investment returns. You can manage the risk by controlling the asset allocation, how much of the investment is in stocks and how much is in bonds or other low-risk investments. All 529 college savings plans offer an age-based asset allocation that starts off aggressive when the child is young and gradually shifts to a lower percentage of stocks as college approaches. Risk-averse investors can also invest in FDIC-insured portfolios within many of the 529 plans. Prepaid tuition plans, on their other hand, let you buy a year's worth of tuition and have it always be worth a year's worth of tuition. This provides some parents with peace of mind. But you have to pay a premium on top of the year's tuition, and some of the prepaid tuition plans suffer from actuarial shortfalls. There are only a handful of prepaid tuition plans left. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Martha to ask the poll question.
Thank you, Mark. All right, so our next poll question is related to prepaid plans. And the question is, did you know that there were prepaid tuition plans for private universities? So I've just launched that and you can answer yes or no. We'll give that a second to give people a chance to respond, and then I'll share those results. All right, that's slowing down. I'm going to end the poll. And nearly 60% of the people said, no, I had no idea that, oh, sorry, I didn't share. There we go. Nearly 60% of people said that, no, they had no idea that there was such a thing as a prepaid tuition plan for private universities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jonathan to talk more about prepaid tuition plans in general and the prepaid college 529 plan.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Mark, and thank you, Martha, for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. As Mark mentioned, most of what we hear about in the 529 space is related to the 529 savings plans. But there is this other option called the prepaid tuition plans. And essentially, as the name implies, prepaid plans allow you, the account owner, the opportunity to prepay for future college costs. Now, each plan is designed a bit differently, but again, that primary advantage of these plans is the ability to lock in tuition rates and or prepay some educational costs at the participating colleges. So when you think about prepaid plans, really the benefit or the primary goal is to provide a hedge against tuition inflation, whereas you're exposed to a little more risk potentially on the 529, the traditional savings plans. These prepaid plans do provide a hedge against tuition inflation. As Mark mentioned, a handful of states offer these right now. They are less than what's kind of the traditional savings plans. Currently, I think there's about 18 states sponsored, but only 10 are currently accepting new applicants. And many of those, I believe 8 or 9, have residency restrictions associated with them. So as Martha mentioned, and as came out in the poll question, one plan that is available to folks, and certainly the organization that I work with, is Private College 529. And what this plan allows you to do is to prepay tuition, lock in tuition rates at close to 300 private colleges and universities across the US. And so we are the only plan available out there that allows you to, again, kind of pre-purchase tuition at these participating colleges and universities. Any residents of any state can participate in these plans. And we, again, working with those private colleges and universities, the ultimate goal is for account owners, folks like yourselves, to lock in that rate of tuition and fees at participating colleges that are part of the plan and any that may join the plan in the future. And so it really is just it's a great way to kind of get ahead of the curve, to hedge against tuition inflation at these particular participating college and universities. And with close to 300 private college and universities, there are a lot of options available to folks as they're going through that. With the prepaid plan, the Private College 529 plan, and or any other prepaid plan, we talk a lot about using that in conjunction with that traditional 529 savings plan. Certainly we at Private College 529, our account owners, many of them through conversations and surveys, we know that they also have that traditional 529 savings plan, but they're using kind of both of these to round out and have an optimal college savings portfolio. And so it really is a great way, as we talked about, to hedge against tuition inflation and then using in conjunction with a traditional 529 savings plan.
Thank you, Jonathan. We actually had a number of questions that came up while you were going through that. So Suzanne asked, and I think this might be the slogan you use, do any of these plans lock in tuition at today's rate?
Yes, they do. Yep. And so our particular plan, that's really Private College 529 plan is all about locking in today's tuition for purchase of tomorrow's costs. Other prepaid plans work in a similar vein. It's really a difference if some plans with prepaid, you're essentially are contract plans, which allow you to pay for a certain number of semesters of college tuition, and other unit plans, which are more like a redeemable credits when you kind of use the participating school. But with Private College 529 plan, that's exactly what it is. You're locking in the current rate of tuition and fees at the participating colleges.
All right. And then there were some specific questions about Private College 529. I think a lot of them, there were several that were related to what if your child doesn't go to ends up going to a college that's not on the list, not one of the participating schools?
Great question. So, we're always adding new schools to the plan, and certainly if even after you open an account, any new schools that join the plan, you would be essentially have that same advantage of when you open that account, that locked in rate. But if your child doesn't go to one of the schools in the plan, you do have several options. The first is that you could change the beneficiary to a qualified family member. So you could change that beneficiary to someone else. The second is that you could withdraw those funds and roll them over into a state-sponsored 529 plan. Or the last is that you could request a withdrawal from the funds. And as long as you're using them on qualified higher education expenses, you won't be subject to any taxes.
All right, well, thank you so much. And we will now turn it back to Mark to finish out the presentation. And just to let everyone know, we will have more time for Q&A after Mark finishes.
Thanks, Martha.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martha and Jonathan. So that was step one in choosing a college savings vehicle. Now we turn to step two. When choosing a 529 plan, you should consider both the state income tax incentives and the fees. Sometimes there is a trade-off between lower fees in an out-of-state plan and state income tax breaks in an in-state plan. Lower fees may matter more when the child is young, and the state tax breaks may matter more when the child enrolls in high school, starting around then, sometimes a little before, sometimes a little after. That's because the fees apply to the entire investment every single year, while the state income tax breaks apply only to that year's contributions. And this chart, we have it also on the website, shows you for a particular set of assumptions, which states have the best state income tax breaks for the typical family. And you can see like Indiana here, it's got the best, but then you're still saving a pretty penny on many of these. And if you reinvest the state tax savings in the 529 plan, it can grow even further. Now, step three involves researching and comparing your options. There are many tools on savingforcollege.com for researching 529 plans, including a comparison tool and plan detail pages. You should research the plan manager's track record and the risk that the plan may change managers, because if they change managers, some of the investment options may change. And should especially consider the differences in the fees. Minimizing costs is the key to maximizing net returns. Note that the fees shown on this slide are for direct sold 529 plans. The fees for advisor sold 529 plans can be higher than the fees for a direct sold plan. Some of the advisor sold 529 plans also charge commissions. We consider all of these factors, among others, when we're assigning a 5 cap rating to the 529 plans. Now we turn to step 4. When choosing a 529 savings plan, it is also important to identify your risk tolerance. How comfortable are you with the possibility of losing money in your investment? How much exposure should you have to the stock market? More than 2/3 of families will choose an age-based investment glide path, which reduces the exposure to the stock market as college approaches. Each year it shifts to lower and lower risk investments so that you're locking in your earnings and you have less risk of loss to the principal. Now, there are two main types of 529 plan portfolios, static and dynamic. Static 529 plans have a specific percentage of equities and that does not change. Age-based or enrollment-based 529 plans, like I just discussed, change the asset allocation periodically, usually every year, sometimes every few years, to manage the risk from stock market volatility. And this year, we've especially seen a lot of stock market volatility, day in and day out. Many 529 plans also offer a choice of portfolios with active management and portfolios with passive management, like index funds. So now we'll turn to the impact on financial aid. Martha, I'd like you to ask your final poll question.
All right, so let me bring that up, and this is related to financial aid. The question is, I worry that saving in a 529 plan may reduce my family's financial aid eligibility in the future. So if everyone could just answer yes or no. And the responses are coming in there. All right. Thanks everyone for participating. Let me share the results here on the screen. So yeah, 58% of you said that yes, you worry that saving in a 529 plan may reduce future financial aid eligibility.
Thank you, Martha. So the free application for federal student aid, or FAFSA as it is known, is used to apply for financial aid from the federal and state governments, as well as most colleges and universities. I mentioned the CSS profile that's used by 186 colleges for their own financial aid funds, but the thousands of other colleges rely on the FAFSA. The FAFSA calculates the expected family contribution, or EFC, as a measure of the family's ability to pay for college. A lower EFC means lower ability to pay, which means a greater financial need, which means a greater financial aid. The FAFSA bases the EFC on the sum of a parent contribution and a student contribution. Each of these is based on contributions from income and contributions from assets. Income includes adjusted gross income on your federal income tax return, as well as untaxed income and benefits. An example of untaxed income is a tax-free distribution from a Roth IRA. Student assets are assessed more heavily than parent assets. There's an assumption that they're there for one purpose and one purpose only, which is to pay for college. Student assets include an UGMA or UTMA account, mutual funds, or other savings accounts that are in the child's name, except for the custodial 529 plan accounts, which have special treatment since 2009 in the Higher Education Act. The parent contribution is divided by the number of children in college. So increasing the number of children in college from 1 to 2 is almost like dividing the parent income in half. That has a really big impact on aid eligibility. Now let's turn to what the impact is of 529 plans on the FAFSA. 529 plans receive favorable treatment on the FAFSA. The first $10,000 or so will fall under what's called an asset protection allowance and will not be counted. The exact amount will depend on the parents' ages. The older parent, the higher the asset protection allowance. Any amount above that allowance is counted at up to a maximum of 5.64% of the account value. Other student assets, such as UGMA or UTMA accounts, are counted at 20%. If a 529 plan is reported as an asset on the FAFSA, qualified distributions are not going to be reported on the FAFSA. Non-qualified distributions, however, are included in adjusted gross income. Now, what if the 529 plan isn't owned by the student or the parent? Maybe it's owned by a grandparent. 529 plans that are owned by someone else, like a grandparent-owned 529 plan, are treated differently. Because it's not owned by the student or parent, there's nothing to report as an asset on the FAFSA. However, distributions will count as student income on a subsequent year's FAFSA, and they'll be counted at up to 50%. There are several workarounds to this because that's a really harsh impact on aid eligibility. One is the family could wait until after January 1st of the student's sophomore year in college, assuming that the student's going to graduate within 4 years, to take a distribution from that grandparent-owned 529 plan. And this will not be reported on a subsequent year's FAFSA because the FAFSA uses 2-year-old information. It's the prior year. That means that 2 years hence, that FAFSA doesn't, the student's already graduated. Now, if the student's going to take 5 years, you have to wait until the junior year in college. Or you could give the money to the parents to save in a parent-owned account. Or you could change the account owner from the grandparent or to the parent if it's allowed by the state. Or you could just leave the money in the account and wait until the student graduates and use it to pay down their student loans. Now let's talk about distributions from 529 plans. First is, how much should you withdraw? First of all, the withdrawals from a 529 plan must match up with the qualified higher education expenses that were paid in the same tax year. For example, you don't want to take a distribution in December to pay spring tuition in January because that passes a tax year boundary. It is best to take the distributions after you have paid the qualified higher education expenses, so you don't accidentally withdraw too much money. You can withdraw up to the amount of a tax-free scholarship without penalty, but the earnings portion of that distribution will still be taxed as ordinary income. Similarly, the American Opportunity Tax Credit is a $2,500 tax credit based on $4,000 of tuition textbook expenses. You can't double dip. So if you were to claim the American Opportunity Tax Credit, you could take a distribution from a 529 plan up to that $4,000 figure penalty free, but you would still have to pay income tax on that earnings portion of that distribution. On the other hand, what many families do is they carve out $4,000 of tuition and textbook expenses in order to claim the American Opportunity Tax Credit, and then they use the 529 plan to pay for other expenses. So like the American Opportunity Tax Credit, there's another tax credit called the Lifetime Learning Tax Credit, and that's up to $10,000 of tuition and textbook expenses. Most families of undergraduate students focus on the American Opportunity Tax Credit because it is a more generous tax credit. It's even more generous than the tax redistribution from a 529 plan. So if you're eligible, you should claim it. Now, if the college issues a refund for expenses that were paid for with a 529 plan distribution, like happened this spring when students were sent home from their campuses because of the pandemic, you can recontribute that refund into a 529 plan for the same beneficiary within 60 days and thereby avoid the problem of having it turn into a non-qualified distribution. Or you could use it for other qualified expenses, like perhaps purchase of a computer if the student's learning program is now online. Now, the recontribution can be to any 529 plan for the same beneficiary, not just the 529 plan from which the distribution was made originally. That gives you a little bit more flexibility. Now, when you're taking a distribution, we recommend making the distribution payable to the beneficiary, not to the account owner. If there happen to be any non-qualified distributions, they're going to be taxed at the beneficiary's lower tax rate if the distribution was to that beneficiary or to the college to pay the beneficiary's expenses. But you want to keep it away from the college because there are potential complications when the distribution is paid directly to the college. The college might treat it as reducing the amount of need-based aid that the student is eligible for. In some cases, it'll reduce it dollar for dollar. In other cases, it'll reduce it 50 cents on the dollar. So making it payable directly to the beneficiary is better. Now, you don't want to have it paid to the account owner because the account owner typically has a higher income tax rate. Thank you. We will now start the Q&A portion of this presentation.
Thanks so much, Mark, for going through all of that information. And there have been a number of questions that have come up. So let me go ahead and start. There are a few sort of 529 basics type questions I think we can get started with. And actually, Jonathan, I might direct this first question to you. So there are a lot of questions about who, basically like who's a qualifying family member, who can open a 529. So maybe you can address the question of who can open a 529 plan for whom. And Mark, you know, after Jonathan answers, if you have anything to add to that, you can jump in as well.
Yeah, great question. So, so really, you know, anyone can open a 529 plan for within the family. So if it's the parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle for the student, and they will just name the beneficiary. You know, as Mark mentioned, there's some advantages and disadvantages to that. Certainly on the financial aid side, we see that most accounts are opened by the parent. Naming the student as the beneficiary, but in terms of kind of who can open it, it's not limited to the nuclear family only.
Got it. Mark, what about, there have been some questions about whether someone outside of the US, let's say a grandparent who lives outside of the US, who may not be a citizen or a resident of the US, could they contribute to a 529 plan?
Yes, they can. And the main issue is they may not get a tax benefit from doing so because they don't pay taxes in the US. But if they're an expat, they might have a tax benefit, um, especially at the state level, if they're technically a resident of a particular state. Um, and also, you don't need to be a US citizen to be a beneficiary of a 529 plan. You can open a 529 plan with a non-citizen, like a permanent resident, as a beneficiary. All they'll need is an individual taxpayer identification number, an ITIN, which they can get from the IRS.
Okay, got it. So you have to be a citizen or a resident to open a plan, but not necessarily a citizen to be a beneficiary, correct?
Correct.
All right. Okay, great. And actually on this idea of contributing to other people's plans, who can talk a little bit, maybe Jonathan, about gifting and, receiving contributions to a 529 plan from someone other than the account owner?
Yeah, so similar to kind of a lot of options when it comes to setting up plans, when it comes to contributing to different plans, certainly you can have folks across the spectrum within the family contribute to 529 savings plans. In fact, that's one of the things that we encourage a lot about, especially around the holidays. If you're looking for particular gifts and ways to boost up the savings plan, you can reach out to grandparents, aunts, uncles, to contribute to the plans of the beneficiary. So certainly a great way to, as you're thinking about gifting and giving those gifts to beneficiaries, it could be across the family.
Got it.
Yeah, I agree that giving the gift to college is a great way to celebrate birthdays, graduations, and the holidays. It's enabling not just an immediate benefit to the student, but it enables them to have a better income after they graduate. There's a lot of evidence that a student who has a 529 plan is more likely to enroll in college and more likely to graduate from college.
Yeah, absolutely. Lasts a lot longer than most toys, right? Mark, what about where can 529 plan funds be used as far as for higher education? Is it just colleges and universities? Is it just colleges and universities in the US?
Well, 529 plans can be used at any college and university that is eligible for Title IV federal student aid, which is basically most accredited colleges and universities in the US. And you don't necessarily need to be a degree candidate. You can use the money for continuing education, not just for obtaining an associate's degree, bachelor's degree, or certificate, or even a graduate degree. In addition to the US colleges, there are about 400 foreign institutions that are eligible for federal student aid, and therefore you can use a 529 plan to pay for them. The one caveat is that transportation is not a qualified 529 plan expense. So you can use the 529 plan to pay for the tuition fees and room and board at the foreign institution. But to get there, you're going to have to use money from some other source to cover your travel expenses.
Got it. Jonathan, question that came up about prepaid tuition plans is, do you have to choose the university that you want your child to attend in advance?
Great question. So specifically for the private college 529 plan, working with close to 300 colleges, you do not have to choose the college that they're going to attend. Certainly that would be a tough thing to do, if you're opening the account when they're born. But what we do require is that when you are opening an account, we're going to have you pick 5 schools to track. And so that's going to allow you, each time you make contributions, to kind of have an idea of what those contributions are purchasing at a particular school. So that's just to kind of give you an idea of what your contributions are basically going to be redeemed for, but you do not have to choose the school that they are going to apply to and say, yep, that's the school that they're going to go to. When you open that account, when you're locking in at all of the participating schools in the plan.
Got it. Great. All right. Okay. So we get a lot of variations. I think every webinar we get a lot of variations on this question. Mark, I'll start this one. Maybe you can answer this one to start. But it's a variation on what happens if I don't use the funds in the 529 plan. So it's like, what if my child gets a scholarship? What if they don't go to college? What, there are a whole lot of different reasons somebody might not use the money or might not use all the money. So can you explain what happens in that case?
Well, with the savings plans, there's no deadline by which you have to take a distribution. The covered education savings account has age 30, but 529 college savings plans do not. You could leave the money in there indefinitely, continuing to grow. Now, some of the prepaid tuition plans do have deadlines, like within 10 years of reaching normal college age, but many don't. And you can always roll over money from a 529 plan, prepaid plan, into a savings plan if that were a concern. You could change the beneficiary to a member of the family of the current beneficiary. So a sibling, a parent, an aunt or an uncle, grandparent, cousins, or even that child's future children could become a beneficiary. So you could be leaving a legacy for your grandchildren and great-grandchildren and so on. You could also change the beneficiary to be yourself and use it to go to graduate school or for your own continuing education. Or last, you could take a non-qualified distribution. Non-qualified distributions, you'll have to pay tax at the federal income tax on the earnings portion of the distribution, not the principal portion of the distribution. And also at the state level, you'll have to pay state income tax, which is no different than if you had put the money in a taxable account, though it is ordinary income and not capital gains. There is a 10% tax penalty on non-qualified distributions, though there are many cases where it can be waived. Finally, if you received a state income tax break on your contributions, you might have to, some states recapture those state income tax breaks that are attributable to the amount of that distribution.
Okay. And Mark, just because it came up as a separate question and I might have missed it, but did you mention trade schools, vocational schools, other types of schools that are also eligible?
Yes, and vocational, technical schools, trade schools, for-profit colleges are eligible. Many of them are eligible for federal student aid, and that's the key determinant. We have a tool on the Saving for College website that lets you look up the eligible institutions. If they have a federal school code or institutional code, then they are eligible destinations for using 529 plan money.
Perfect. Yeah. And you can find that at savingforcollege.com/eligible_institutions, or you can also find it in our menu. Okay, another question that I feel has come up several times is related to whether you should have more than one 529 plan. So Jennifer writes, I have 5 children and it feels like a lot to open 5 accounts. Wouldn't it be best to open a few that will potentially collect more interest on a larger amount of money rather than 5 smaller account balances? I'm also concerned that maybe not all 5 kids will go to college.
Okay, so if you have children of different ages, their investment horizon is going to be different. So it is better to have a separate 529 plan for each. Like if one of them is now enrolling in college and the other is just entering high school, you have a different risk tolerance for each, especially with age-based asset allocations. Also, the state income tax breaks, in some states, it's per beneficiary or per account, as opposed to just one state income tax break per taxpayer. So you may be able to increase the tax breaks by having multiple 529 plans, one per child. And you can also the contribution limits are per child. Now, 529 plans don't have contribution limits, but there is the annual gift tax exclusion, which is per recipient of that gift. So if you have one 529 plan for 3 children, well, the maximum you can give to that 529 plan is that $15,000 donation per donor, contribution per donor. Whereas if you had 3 separate 529 plans, you could do 3 times as much, or $45,000 of contributions. And also there's a 5-year gift tax averaging, which is also called super funding, which lets a grandparent give a really big lump sum to a 529 plan, up to 5 times as much, and then have it treated as though it were made over a 5-year period. So instead of $15,000, you could give a lump sum of $75,000. Each grandparent could do that. So that's, as a couple, that would be $150,000. But if you have only one 529 plan, then they can only do it once. Whereas you have separate 529 plans, they can contribute the same amount to each, for one for each child. In addition, there are, you can use 529 plans to pay for K-12 tuition up to $10,000 per year. And it's generally a good idea, if you're going to do that, to have a separate 529 plan for that purpose, one for college, one for elementary and secondary school, for a couple of reasons. One, your time horizon is different. K-12 is, you're going to need the money sooner, and so you may be less, you have lower risk tolerance for those investments. And the other thing about this is that before there were 529 plans to be used for K-12 tuition, and your child was at a private school, they would tend to ignore the money in the 529 plan because it was dedicated for college. But now that you can use a 529 plan for K-12 tuition, some of these private schools are taking a look at that money and saying, well, it's available to pay for K-12. So if you have a separate 529 plan for the K-12, you can make the argument that, hey, this money is the one that's earmarked for K-12, the other money is earmarked for college.
Okay. There's Ron asks an interesting question that I think actually addresses a couple of things. He says, I've been doing a lot of number crunching. I don't see how anyone can possibly save enough for college. People would have to save $400, $500 a month to accomplish this. So I guess the question, to me, there's 2 questions here. One is, how much should somebody be aiming to save? And what % of college should they be trying to cover? Should they be saving with the aim to pay for the whole thing?
Right. So the first thing is, even if you can't save the full amount, you should start saving. Because once you start saving, it becomes easier to save more, especially if you signed up for an automatic investment plan. And you can sign up for these plans with as little as $25 a month contribution. Now, generally, with a major life cycle expense like paying for college, you spread out the costs over time. So you're not going to pay one big lump sum, but rather you're going to use past income, which is the savings, current income and financial aid, and then future income, which is loans, to pay for college. So that's 3 things. So there's something called a 1/3 rule, which is a very rough cut that says, well, you should set your college savings goal at 1/3 of the future college costs. And if you save more, that reduces the debt. If you save less, you're probably going to have to borrow more. Now, college costs go up by about a factor of 2 to 3 over any 17-year period, from birth to college enrollment. So since 3 times 1/3 is 1, that suggests that your college savings goal should be the cost of a college education, all 4 years if you're going to a 4-year school, the year the child was born. And now you may not be able to predict the specific college that the child's going to enroll in. It's very hard to predict what they're going to play with or eat the next day, let alone in 17 years. But you can probably predict the type of college. Is it going to be an in-state public college, an out-of-state public college, or a private 4-year college? And so based on that, you can look at the average cost of a 4-year college education or a 2-year college education, and use that to set your college savings goal. So based on the current college costs, if your child is going to go to an in-state public college, you should probably be saving about $250 a month from birth to reach that 1/3 goal. If they're going to an out-of-state public college, it's $450 a month. And if it's to a private four-year college, then it should be $550 a month. Now that seems like a lot, and it's hard to save that much, but every dollar you save is going to be a dollar less you're going to have to borrow. And once you start saving, it becomes easier to increase the savings. For example, when your child no longer needs diapers, well, you take the money that you were previously using to pay for diapers and you redirect it at the college savings. Typical family is going to be spending $3,000 a year on diapers, which is $250 a month. So that's one way you get it. Or they no longer need daycare. That's another big savings that you can redirect. And daycare can be even more expensive. You get a big income tax refund. Take half that money and contribute it to the 529 plans, and the rest use that for your fund money. Or you get an inheritance, or you win the lottery. Any kind of unexpected money that you didn't need for a particular purpose, well, you can use that to save for college or for retirement. And then if you save, if you get a raise or a bonus, well, you can also devote that to college savings. So whenever you get an opportunity, you think, okay, maybe I should increase the amount I'm saving. And of course, birthdays and holidays and graduations, those are great times to give the gift of college to help that 529 plan grow.
Jonathan, do you have anything to add there? For example, is there like a minimum contribution at private college 529 plan? What do you see your investors doing?
Yeah, I think Mark brought up a number of great points, especially about the, every dollar that you're saving is potentially one less that you need to borrow. If you're looking at kind of the trade-off there between saving money in the long term versus what you might have to borrow, and then the interest on whatever debt you're taking on, there really is that advantageous point of kind of getting in the habit and saving as much as you can. Not to mention, as was pointed out earlier, the impact is relatively minimal on the financial aid formula when it comes to savings. The formula was created to incentivize folks to save. With our plan, there is $25 is the minimum to open an account, and we encourage folks to save $500 within the first 2 years. But what's really good about the prepaid as well, in conjunction with the traditional savings plan, is that while you might not save the entire amount, you are again locking in, and you're hedging against potentially large increases in tuition that may happen. Now, certainly colleges and universities raise their rates of tuition at various rates each year, but given what's going on right now, and we know that thinking moving forward, some colleges may have to raise tuition at a higher rate than what they've done in the past to meet some shortfalls that they had this year. So, I think in general, even if you can't save the entire amount, certainly doing what you can to get ahead of the ball game is only going to be advantageous to you and your student in the end.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to underscore something that Jonathan said about tuition inflation. What the pattern that we've seen in past economic downturns is, towards the end of an economic downturn, state appropriations for public higher education get cut because the states have to balance their budget. Their state tax revenue, whether income tax or sales tax, is down because of that recession. And so the first place they cut is support of post-secondary education. And that in turn forces the public colleges to increase their tuition at above average rates, often in the double digits. And even the private colleges also, right now many of them are freezing their tuition or increasing it at only about 2%. But they've had huge expenses for buying lots of plexiglass and PPE, and the demand for financial aid has doubled or even tripled, so they have to give out more financial aid. And so they're hurting financially. And so once the pandemic is over, you can probably expect them to start increasing their tuition at above average rates. So saving in a 529 plan, in a prepaid tuition plan as well, can be a great way to um, I mean, have the money to pay for the costs despite the increases in college costs.
Great, great information. Okay, a more sort of technical question that's come up a bunch. Most recently, Suresh asked, is there any per year maximum for contributing to a 529 plan? And other questions have come up, and I think sometimes people might see the $15,000 gift tax exclusion as a maximum. So Mark, can you sort of talk about like what's the maximums as they apply to 529 plans, maximum contributions?
So 529 plans themselves do not have any annual contribution limit. They do have aggregate limits that range from 235,000 to 529,000. Once the balance in the 529 plan account reaches that state's aggregate limit, you can't make further contributions, although the money in there can continue to earn and grow. The $15,000 limit is the gift tax exclusion. If you give a gift to someone, whether it's to their 529 plan or you're just giving them a present, maybe you're buying them a car or giving them money to buy a used car or something, you can give up to $15,000 a year from each contributor can give $15,000 a year for each beneficiary, and it will not be subject to gift taxes. Gift taxes are paid by the giver, not the recipient. If you exceed that amount, and I'll talk about the super funding in just a second, then you might have to file a gift tax return, but you have a lifetime gift tax exclusion that's $11.7 million. Most people aren't going to reach that, but you would have to file the gift tax return. The super funding or 5-year gift tax averaging is a special feature of 529 plans that was created by Congress to allow you to go beyond that $15,000 limit of the annual gift tax exclusion in 1 year. And then if you exceed that, then you can elect to have that gift treated as though it's spread over a 5-year period. So if you gave 75,000, it would be treated as 15,000 this year, 15,000 each of the next 4 years, and you wouldn't be able to give any more gifts to that person during that period, unless that annual gift tax exclusion increase. It does increase every few years. We've been at $15,000 for the last 2 years. It's going to continue at $15,000 in 2021, but it might increase the year after that, which would give you a little bit more ability to give a gift. So it's a way of avoiding the gift taxes. But you could, if you wanted to, you could give more than $75,000 as a lump sum. You would just use up part of your lifetime gift tax exemption.
Thank you, Mark. That's really helpful. Jonathan, I think we have time for one more question, and there's one I think you could answer. I know this is probably different for every 529 plan, but Douglas is asking, if a grandparent wants to contribute money for a birthday or Christmas, what will they need to do to contribute? So how do you make a gift contribution?
Great question. So it's as you mentioned, it will be different for each plan there, but because with private college 529, because it is after tax dollars, which is all of the 529 contributions, they can give funds directly to the beneficiary. It can be directly to the account beneficiary's account. And so easy ways to contribute online. We write on our site kind of ways that you can do that virtually through that environment. So that's probably the easiest way to do that. Traditionally with other 529 plans, I know it's set up, and Mark, you can probably help with this one, but it kind of easy online to go in and make contributions directly to those accounts.
Yeah, many of the 529 plans have a special URL that you can share with your friends and family so that they can make gifts to your child. And many of them will have these cards that you can print out to commemorate your gift. so that the child is receiving something that says, hey, we just gave money to your college savings plan. And there are also third-party organizations that let you buy gift cards that you can give, and then they can deposit that money into their 529 plan account. And there are also like some credit cards have connections to 529 plans. So even if they don't have money to give, but they are using a credit card to pay for things, they can use those credit cards and the rebates will be swept into their 529 plan account. So there are lots of options for giving the gift of college.
Wonderful, wonderful. So it sounds like account owners, if you're interested in getting gifts, check with your 529 plan, see what the easiest way is to do that to let your gift givers know, right? And with that said, we are at 2 o'clock. So I want to thank you, Mark, for sharing all of your insight and knowledge. Jonathan, thank you for being here to share information about prepaid tuition plans and private college 529. Thank you for sponsoring us today. And thanks to everyone who participated for all the great questions. And yes, just a reminder, we will be sending out a link to the recording and to the slides after in a follow-up email. So thank you both again.
Thank you.
Thank you.